Hey, party people, please join me in welcoming the one, the only Nick Wooster to the channel. Welcome, Nick. Hi.
Zoe, how are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to have you here. I am going to start by reading some bits of Nick's bio from his website. There's a lot of good stuff here. I want you to know all the amazing things that he does. So I'm just going to read real quick. Nick Wooster is a design and retail consultant with a resume that reads like a roll call of top American fashion brands and stores. Nick's tenure at the menswear space has spanned over 30 years with various positions at Barney's New York, Bergdorf Goodman, Neiman Marcus, Calvin Klein, Ralph Lauren, and J.C. Penney. He started his career as a buyer, transitioning to design and eventually back to retail. Most recently, Nick has been consulting for a handful of global fashion brands while continuing to cultivate an enviable digital presence with a vast network of followers on social media. Currently, the style editor at Large magazine and creative director of luxury Italian sportswear brand Paul & Shark, Nick has also recently collaborated with Italian-crafted Brooklyn-based brand Greats. Nick continues to consult with brands around the world, designing a capsule collection with the Japanese brand Kwon, as well as a capsule for the Italian brand Mr. and Mrs. Italy. Go to nickwooster.com. There's his whole bio is there. This amazing timeline is there. I love how you added I think it was you had squeezed in, had lunch with Fran Lebowitz, right in there somewhere. If you are feeling uninspired by fashion in general or menswear specifically, please go to Nick's website and just click on that streetwear button and check out some of Nick's amazing outfits. You know how I feel about a man in pink. Perfect. On and on. Okay. Anyway, Nick, welcome. And hi, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. It's so weird to have something like that read out loud. But what's interesting is, and how I sort of see myself today is that, yeah, I've actually been working around fashion or around clothes, which for me, it's really what it is. It's the clothing business for 45 years. It'll be 46 years this year. I started when I was a sophomore in high school, junior in high school. I was 16 years old and worked in a clothing store. And that's so fundamental to who, I am. It was really, I mean, I've told the story a million times, but it was really because my mom, we grew up completely middle. We weren't rich, we weren't poor. And my mom, I mean, I don't know, when I was in a freshman in high school, I came home and I said, Mom, I want a cashmere sweater, like Jay Simpson has. And she said, I'm happy to buy you a sweater, but it's not going to be cashmere. If you want cashmere, go and work for it. So I sort of figured out that they had the cashmere sweaters at the nicest store in town. So when she told me I needed to work, I was like, all right, let me go there and see if they need help. And, I asked and they said yes, which is one of those really random things in life. I was a young kid who just went in and said, could I, do you need any help after school or on the weekends? And they were like, we do. So, I was super fortunate but also it's exactly the thing that I tell people when they say they want to work in fashion, then I say, then work in fashion or specifically work in a store, because that's what I did. Or when people ask me, how can I be like you? I'm like, go work in a store, because it doesn't happen overnight. And I am testament to that. I mean, without getting into a whole bio, I mean, I can sort of sum up my life as being, my 20s and 30s were on fire and amazing. And so was my drug problem. And then by my 40s, I crashed and burned and I couldn't get arrested. And then, when I was I don't know, 44, 2004, living in Los Angeles and not, I ended up having to work at Barney's in Beverly Hills selling women's designer dresses because I got fired from a job and I needed to work. And, I was in the store and somebody said, oh, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I don't really have a job right now. And they're like, well, come and work here. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I was a buyer here, 20 years before that. And they were like, well, if you need to work, we have a job. So I took it. And, I wasn't there forever, 7 months or something, but, in my mid 40s and thinking, all right, fashion was a young person's game. I guess that, the life that I used to have, I won't have again. And when I turned 50 is when everything started. When we were speaking before, you said something about like you knew me from 2005, 2006. You didn't know me from then because I was actually living in LA and totally under the radar. But in 2010, I started a Tumblr and I became content. And that's when I was the men's fashion director at
That's
Marcus.
the blog I saw. Just
Yes,
not as
yes.
early, but yeah, that's the blog I saw.
Yes. And so, but it was like, but that's what was so shocking to me is because after sort of having 8 years away from the business and being, like, I don't know, having the big jobs that I used to have, I I read in women's in WWD that the men's fashion director job at Neiman Marcus and Bergdorf Goodman was available. And so I still knew people there and I asked them, what the deal was. And they told me, listen, here's who you have to speak to. And I sent my resume in and made the contact thinking there's no way that they're going to hire me for this because I really haven't been in this world for 7 to 8 years. And, they got back to me, which I was like, really? Like, I couldn't believe it. And then a little bit of time elapsed. And what I am assuming is that they sort of exhausted all the possibilities in New York, because as I said, I was living in LA. And, sort of at the end of the year 2009, as we were coming up on the men's season starting in Europe in January, they offered me the job. I mean, I had several interviews and I did meet with people in New York, but it went very slowly. And I just assumed, okay, this isn't really going to happen. But the other thing that I can say about that is that it probably happened because I didn't need it to happen. I think that with careers, or at least my career, there were so many points that I was really desperate where I wanted something so badly, and maybe it's like relationships too, because I know people that want to be in relationships. And I always find that if you want something really badly, it usually doesn't come. But I was at a point in my life, I'd been living in LA for 6 years, 7 years, and I was like totally okay. Like I had sort of, I don't want to say resigned myself, but I had sort of gotten okay with my life in LA. I love LA. And I was just kind of like, good, and it was really one of the first times in my life. I was 49 and I thought, all right, this is cool. Like I'm good. But I sort of took the plunge to see if it could happen. But I really remembered at the time thinking, you know what, if this happens, great. And if it doesn't happen, great, I'm good, because I really had a nice life. And it happened. And then I was like, really? Like, and so what ended up happening was I won the lottery, in that it was exactly a moment in time when, to your point, blogs had been sort of like percolating for 5, 6 years. Tumblr was sort of like going, and #menswear was a thing. And, the dress code at Neiman Marcus was that you had to wear a jacket and a tie. Which, of course, after living in LA for 6 years, I was like, fuck, like, I hate that. But I'm really grateful to them for having that dress code, because it was like the clothes that I needed to wear to work to be, okay for, I got written up on the, many times actually, because I didn't follow the dress code properly. But which is kind of how I do things. But the reality was that I sort of like figured out how to push the limits of wearing a jacket and a tie. And I sort of looked, and because I love clothes, this is like what it all boils down to is I love clothes, period. I don't love fashion. I don't love the fashion business per se. I love clothes. So anyway, I started getting my picture taken. And again, it was like that thing of like, why are you taking my picture now? I used to be cute. Like, but okay, sure. And, like I was, Tommy Ton and Scott Schumann were probably the two of the most important street style photographers of the time. I mean, after Bill Cunningham, of course, but
Yeah, I remember the sartorialist. I was following him alongside, yeah, Tommy Ton and yeah.
Right. And Jack and Jill. And again, I didn't even really I knew about the sartorialist and I had heard of Tommy Tom, but I didn't know anything about them. And I didn't plan to get my picture taken. Like, I remember Scott pulled me aside and said, "Oh, can I take a portrait?" And I was like, "Sure." He didn't actually run that one. He sort of caught me after a Gucci show, which is the first picture that he posted. And what's so funny is that I didn't even know that he was taking my picture. And then somebody said, "Oh wow, you're on the sartorialist." And in those days, not that it isn't a big deal now, to be on his Instagram or something, it is. It's always flattering when anyone does this. But I was like, really? Like, wow. Like I didn't even know that he had taken my picture. And it was just like one of those things that he took a photo of me talking to somebody who I used to work with at Bergdorf's and hadn't seen for, probably 15 years before or after. And it was just one of those like random moments. And I'm eternally grateful for that. Like I remember it like it was yesterday also. And then obviously a lot's happened in the past 12 years. This is January of 2010. But that's really when everything happened that you and I are talking, because that's when it started.
Wow. So I have so many questions. Listen,
Okay.
I know you saw the social media, the Instagram post and on Twitter where I was like, if you have questions for Nick Wooster, let me know. So I have like a million questions, but I also have a million questions.
Okay.
But okay, so where do I even want to start? Because here's the thing. Okay, so to my audience who may or may not know, Nick and I met because we are co-authors on a book project with like a dozen other people. So there's like 15 co-authors and we each wrote a chapter about our path to to being entrepreneurs and how we found success in our various fields. And the woman spearheading the project, her name is Patricia, and I spoke with her last week. And she said, hey, when you talk to Nick, you should ask him, because apparently he had written part of this in his chapter. He's like, you should talk to him about all the times that he's gotten fired. And I was like, okay, I'm going to tell him you said that. And she's like, it's fine. I think that just hearing this story that you just told is so incredible, because I think that people need to be reminded often that success isn't a straight shot, and that, yeah, it's more like a awkward zigzag. And and also there's this thing where, and this comes up on my channel a lot, is number one, if you don't make it as a 20-something beautiful, youthful person, then you're never going to make it in fashion. Or if you fail, that's it. Those are all your chances. You don't get another chance. And there's actually a lot of questions people asked about whether or not you've experienced ageism and within the industry when there's so many young people, and how late is it? How late is too late to enter the fashion industry? So can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. And again, you sort of bring up a whole host of topics. I mean, it's easy for me to say today that it was, okay, when I said I walked into this clothing store and, okay, yes, I'm a white male. And although I'm gay, that hopefully you don't immediately know that about me, but you might too. I mean, it doesn't really matter. The point being that I understand as a white male, I've probably been afforded privileges that many other people don't have. So that's the first thing. But with that said, the thing that I do know about just my experience is that, yeah, my very, very first job, I actually got fired from. And I always talk about having my first job being working at this clothing store, which is true. It's just that I also worked for another clothing store before that. And after like 3 months, they fired me because there were all these old guys sitting around. And I thought, oh, well, if they're sitting around, I should be doing that too. And then what I didn't realize was the reason that they hired me was so that I could do the thing so those old guys could sit around. And, after like I don't know, the sort of the seventh or eighth week, they were like, okay, this isn't working out. I would go in every Saturday. They were like, yeah, we don't need your help. And, and of course, I didn't understand at that moment what I just told you. I was like, okay, fine. I hated that story anyway, and what I learned later is that, how you work, your ethic, your work ethic, which as a Midwestern kid, I grew up in Kansas, as a Midwestern kid with a very hardworking father who worked in, who had a business, and then my mom who stayed home and was also very hardworking. Not to say she because that poor woman, I mean, was raising three boys, cooking, cleaning. I mean, I never made my bed a day in my life until I went to college. Like I didn't make my bed. My mom did that, and which is horrifying to sort of articulate now. Like what a horrible thing, but that's what happened. I mean, that's how we were raised. So my parents worked very hard. My dad's, mother worked very hard, and my mom's father worked. So all of those sort of like examples were around. But I, of course, am like how all 20-year-olds are. I was an asshole. Like I was an idiot, not sort of when they talk about like millennials or Gen Z, as being the worst. No, they're not. I was the worst. I'm a boomer. I'm the end of the boomers. I was the worst. Maybe the boomers before me were better. I'm probably closer to Gen X in terms of my mentality, but I was born in 1960. And trust me, I was an asshole. Like, so it anyway, how the career works is, yes, I had a lot of great opportunities, let's say, given to me that I took advantage of. And I, was very ambitious and very, I get bored easily. So I was always looking for the next right thing. This is why I'm not in a relationship, because I'm always looking over my shoulder, like, is there something better over here? And, and that's really been the way that I've always been. And that's me. Like, I don't apologize for it. In terms of building a career, probably I could have done a better job of maybe staying in a few places longer or something. But I believe that that's what makes me me, meaning that the minute I get sort of like ready and thinking about something else, I basically did that. And, today, what ends up happening at I'll be 62 this year, is that, yeah, I think ageism itself is a thing. And I'm a beneficiary of sort of like this life that sort of young people have or aspire to, which I'm eternally grateful for. But, but I see it around me. I know many of my peers, people that I've known and worked with that are even if 5 to 10 years younger than me, are having trouble, getting the next right job or getting a job. So fashion, which is a terrible business for a variety of reasons, meaning as a business model. So if you're a young kid wanting to have a brand, the business model of fashion is a terrible model, because you've got to fork out all this money to buy fabric and produce clothes. And then you've got to show it, which costs money. And then you've got to wait for orders. And then while you're doing that, you've got to make the production as well as start to produce the next season, all before you get paid. It's a terrible business model. It's a mercenary, brutal business model, and also it is for people and personalities, models, all these young kids that have bright ambition, big eyes, and, want to do all these things. And they go to their first casting, or they, start interviewing for jobs. And then they see that it's a pretty tough industry. I'm sure that all glamour industries, advertising, music, sports, Hollywood, are tough too. I don't think fashion's the only one, but it's the one that I know and the one that I know about. So I don't know if I answered all of your questions, but it's still a stuff. Part of it is that I could never tell anyone how to sort of build a career, because I really don't know how to do it. I just kept doing. In AA, we talk about like, do the next right thing. Like, you just do the next right thing. And eventually something will work out. But you just have to be sort of patient, and I do believe that a lot of it is luck, but also luck is you have to work at being lucky. I mean, it's not just hoping you win the lottery. It's like if you do some things, you may help the universe make you lucky. By that, I mean work.
That's so weird because I've never been to an AA meeting, but I talk about that a little bit in my chapter where you should just really focus on what you're doing right now and just try to be really good at it and like try to make that very successful instead of trying to play chess with your career where it's like, oh, is this gonna, and then like map things out. It's like, no, you were handed this opportunity, do a really good job at it, and then finish that up and like, celebrate your success, which is really good for your mental health, and then do the next thing and do that really well. Because I don't know if playing chess with your career actually works for anybody really, because life is so unpredictable, and especially in the fashion industry. So
It is. I mean, I always tell people too, like, especially young people that are sort of like in that first or second job. I mean, this is after free internships. I'm saying like a paying job. So many times, and it's true, I tell young people that are in their sort of like first or second job, and they may or may not have a boss that they are smarter than. Probably they are smarter than their boss, because a lot of people fall upward in the fashion world. I think in all corporate settings, a lot of, and I'll tell you why I think that is. But anyway, just wait. This is what I always tell them. Just wait. Because if they're really as horrible as they think they are, they'll probably get bored like they are, and they'll get another job or they'll get fired. And by default, you find yourself in a job. This is what happened to me. Like you'll find yourself in a job just by being there. And so I'm not saying that if you're in an abusive situation or a terrible situation or, something like that, that you should stay in it. But I know how I am. And the minute I get bored, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to do something else. And, my thing would be just wait. Just wait, because it's shocking how many people, the churn that happens at all levels. And so you can find yourself in a situation where you get that job just because you're there.
just to step back into what you were saying about how the fashion model as a business model is terrible. There's a lot of conversation about how wholesale is dead. What do you think? Like, do you think wholesale will ever really go away or
No.
change enough?
Okay. So I don't have a crystal ball, because if I did, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I'd be playing the futures market. But yeah, I mean, it is changed. It's changing. The landscape of retail and obviously wholesale has changed and is currently changing. But I don't fundamentally believe it will completely go away. In the same way that I don't believe that physical stores will completely go away. I mean, for sure, we've learned, and especially it was accelerated because of the pandemic. Buying things online it's just another tool. It's just another way to do things, and certainly makes life very easy for a lot of people. It's probably allowed for new business to happen in luxury or in retail, and it's probably taken away some business from certain stores. But by the same token, I do believe that compelling retail, Apple, Tiffany, Bergdorf's, I'm sure there's, Le Bon Marché in Paris. Like, there's a million amazing stores still, Dover Street Market, and there will always be a need and a desire for that kind of thing. So in that case, they need to buy from brands, and so there will always be, or I believe there will be, a wholesale channel, but it probably is not as big as it once was, and the number of showrooms and the opportunity around wholesale will probably be less. But I still think that if you're a small brand, you're probably not going to be able to afford to be direct to customer if you didn't start out that way. There's a lot of barriers to entry to make that happen. But with that said, I think that, some brands that maybe started in wholesale could pivot. And I think that, in the same way that some brands that start as direct to customer pivot and add, or I wouldn't say they would give up that, but because nobody's giving that up. Everybody wants a direct line to someone, but they can also pivot and add wholesale to what they're doing. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but for sure, if there used to be 100 showrooms, there might be, 11 when it's all said and done. But that's not to say that, I mean, it is changing for sure. And then consequently trade shows and a lot of the other sort of ancillary things that go along with this are changing as well.
So switching a little bit, okay. So when I did the call out for questions on social media, I would say that just a lot of questions were, can I raid your closet? To which I said, no, if anyone's doing that, I'm first. Okay. So stop right there.
I'm super selfish with clothes. No, you may not raid my closet.
And then number 2, and I quote, how do you keep yourself so fly? Okay, that's a direct quote. People are really dying to know, like, just a ton of questions about your style, your personal style, and how to cultivate personal style, and how do you shop, and how do you pick things out? Like, people really respect your eye, and so I got a lot of questions on that. So can you speak about your personal style and kind of how it's evolved over time and what you look for when you're shopping for yourself?
So, okay. So my style has totally evolved, and it continues to evolve, I believe. But it still goes back to that fundamental thing. Like, I love clothes. I have loved clothes since the moment I was conscious. As a little kid, as a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, I had very specific, tantrums around wanting or not wanting to wear something. And that it became very clear before I ever went to kindergarten that my mom had I had to be involved in every decision, which is kind of how designers work, I think. Like, I mean, it's a creative process. It's like, it's a good idea if it's my idea. Now, you might be able to help me get to that idea. And a lot of clever people have been able to do that. And I have had to do that with a lot of other people who are just like me. But for sure, I had to have it say in my clothes. Otherwise, it wasn't going to happen. Like, I just wouldn't wear it. In the way that some kids are musical, some kids are athletic, some kids, are math, have an aptitude for math. I believe I have an aptitude for dressing myself. Like, that is just something that I know how to do. But I remember when my first buying job was at Barney's in 1987. And I worked for a really, intimidating guy, this guy, Peter Rizzo, who I honestly believe taught me everything that I know. And Fred Pressman, the owner of Barney's, or the son of Barney Pressman, who made Barney's, who transformed Barney's from a discount suit seller to a luxury emporium. So Fred taught Peter everything, and Peter in turn taught me. And, I honestly believe that everything I learned in 1987 in those opening, that opening moment of my career, I had to learn how to hone my taste. They taught me how to sort of edit and how to sort of because I think that I know that I was all over the place. And I think that that's probably the single biggest mistake that people make in this regard, is that, they want this and they want that, and they want Versace, and then they want Balenciaga, and then they want, Supreme. And okay, great, sure. All those things are great, but you probably need to start somewhere before you can get there, and so, like, my advice for style is always start with the basics. So if you have a foundation of basics, and by that I mean, the color navy blue, the color gray, the color black, the color white, as building blocks, then you can layer on all kinds of things. But if you just go out there thinking, I want that Versace shirt, and I want those Balenciaga sneakers, and I want a Gucci belt, and, and that's how you'll be stylish, you won't. You won't. Less is more. And, that sort of like, I don't know, that saying attributed to Coco Chanel is like, you really need to look at yourself in the mirror and probably take one thing away. And I continue to do that today, because sometimes I, get a little overexcited maybe and throw on a bunch of shit. And it's like, ooh, I'm well served by remembering that. Now, trust me, there's plenty of pictures to indicate that I didn't follow that advice. But, and so to answer your question about how do you develop your sense of style, all these things, I mean, that's a book and an educational course that I might be doing because we're never gonna solve that in this conversation.
I'm actually so glad you say that, because I get these questions, and not just this kind of question, but a lot of different kinds of questions where, people expect like a pithy, like 3-line answer. And I'm like, oh no, like I could create a curriculum for a whole degree on that. Like
because
not,
the reason why is this, this has taught us that we can do that. And to a certain extent, we can, and kids can. And it's kind of like, I noticed this in my nephews. I don't feel, and I'm not, I mean, if they are going to watch this, which I'm sure they won't, but if they hear this, I'm not trying to judge you. It's just an observation. And again, I believe it's generational. But I also believe that there isn't probably the evidence that they have or need, but like, I would think that they would want to learn and explore and understand like the history of something. And in the end, I don't really think they do. And it's because I think they are so used to this that they don't need to necessarily. Now, I think it's a little bit interesting. And it's also why I believe I'm qualified to have 900,000 followers on Instagram, is because, yeah, I do know something. Like, I have had some experience. Now, I understand that there are many people who have way more followers than me and with way less experience, and power to you. Like, that's awesome. It's not about one versus the other, but I just know for me, I feel like I earned every one of them because of what I did long before Instagram ever came around. But I believe that there's value in history, in education, in sort of like curiosity. Like, these things to me are really important, and they've formed the core of how I operate and how I do arrive at the clothes I pick, the things I decide to wear, and the career that I definitely had.
Did you go to art school?
No, I went to the University of Kansas. So I'll never forget, when I was like a kid, I said to my mom, I want to go to UCLA or Harvard. This is when I was like a junior in high school. And my mom and meanwhile, I had done nothing to be able to do that. And my mom just looked at me and she said, we're happy to send you to college, KU or K-State, the University of Kansas or Kansas State University. And the point being that, like, I had a public, public high school and public college, public university. And of course they went to K-State. So I chose KU because it was the bigger school and I thought it was more glamorous. Now, I will say my career and certainly my choices were always based on, I was very impressionable. And I believe that it's a sort of, not, I don't want to say a failing, but obviously there's some psychology behind that. Like, you're trying to make up for something, but I was always very like, concerned about what others would think of me, even though I was gay. Well, probably because I was gay. But by the same token, when I got dressed, like I always say this about getting dressed, I'm fearless. I'm fearful in every area of my life except getting dressed, in which case I'm completely fearless. Like, I'm afraid of heights, but I'm not afraid of wearing a skirt. I'm afraid of like what people think of me, but I'll wear like pink, pants. Like, it's just, I've always been like that. And, and that's the weird dichotomy of being like an introvert extrovert, or, an introverted extrovert because I definitely, want you to like notice me, but I don't want you to talk to me, kind of thing. Um,
That is so relatable. That is so relatable. Do you have any thoughts on fashion school? Because I would say that if I had a dollar for any time anybody asked me if fashion school was necessary for a career in fashion, I could quit this channel and retire in Bali or something similar.
okay, so I hope this is not going to offend you. So I absolutely don't think that a degree from a fashion school is essential for a career in fashion, except for pattern making and draping and sketching and those kinds of things.
You
So
didn't offend me because that's usually my answer. Like, unless you want something super technical, you really have to study a very technical thing. But there are a
so
lot of pathways.
that's right. And I know some people, who studied fashion merchandising who in fact are merchandisers. Only a handful, but they do exist. I mean, most merchandisers didn't study merchandising. The one thing but to go back to your original question, but the most important thing I 100% believe in is you need to be educated beyond high school. So that whatever that is, even if it's a vocational school or something, but you've got, I mean, 12 years of public education, or even if it's private, is not enough. I mean, frankly, the 4 years of a university, in my opinion, I'm totally uneducated when it comes to people that I'm friends with that are way smarter than I am. And it's not that you have to have a doctorate degree in order to be, I don't know, intelligent. I'm not saying that, but I was getting high the entire time I was in college, and I was in a fraternity. So that experience was kind of wasted. Thank God my parents didn't send me to a private, um, school, because it would have been wasted on me because I was wasted all the time. But I do think it's a rite of passage, and I think it's an important milestone that you need to sort of do, even though I know it's a really horrible thing to say with what it could do to people because of the extreme. I mean, when I went to college, do you know how much the tuition was at the University of Kansas in 1978? $350 a semester. And when I graduated, it was like 780. And my dad was like, wow, it's really gone up. I mean, that's how much it costs to go to college. So
I went to a private art school 20 years ago, and it ranged from beginning to end $16,000 to $26,000.
right. And again, because then the flip side is, and again, if there are students listening to this, I'm sorry to have to say this to you. You probably already know it. But then what's so heinous is you do have this debt, this huge debt load, whether your parents help you or not. I'm sure that there's going to be something there, and then you don't even get a real job. Like I got right out of school, I got 3 job offers the week I moved to New York and started interviewing. Now they paid $11,000 a year, but you got benefits and you got a paycheck. Like there was no such thing as an internship. It didn't exist. That came in sort of like the end of the 90s, 2000s. That was all, some horrible, thing cooked up by God knows who to, this idea that you have to pay your dues by doing free internships. I think they're basically outlawed in LA, at least in California and New York. I can't speak to the rest of the country, but at worst, you're going to get a minimum job, but at least you should get something. You should get compensated in some way. But it doesn't even begin to be able to allow you to live in a place like New York and also service the debt for your education. So it's a terrible situation that people are put in. So when I say it's an important rite of passage, it is, but I understand that for some people it may be an impossibility or something. But that's when I go back to the thing that I said at the beginning, which is then work. If you want to work in fashion, then work in fashion. And by that I mean doing anything, meaning working in a store, working as an assistant in some way, being an intern, whatever you can do. Because listen, I know about high school kids that start getting internships in places like New York, San Francisco, and LA. Now, granted, they have access because of where they're born or where they're raised. And obviously there's, not every kid has that possibility. But my point being that if you start at an early age, like saying, I'm doing this, and you demonstrate to the universe that you are willing to do it, I believe that the universe will respond in kind, and that you might find yourself being an intern in high school, or, in the summer between your, senior year of college and senior year of high school, freshman year of college. I hired an intern last summer, and I just had breakfast with him. He came to New York. He goes to Savannah SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design. And he helped me put my website together last summer. And he, I will hire him again next summer if he doesn't. But I tell him, get a real job. Don't work for me. Get a real job. But if he doesn't get a real job, he can be my intern, and I pay him something, because it's like his time is valuable. Like, it's not, I would never, somebody said to me ages ago, like, why don't you have a free intern? I'm like, because I wouldn't do that. Like, they need to get paid, and I think it's really important. So anyway, I kind of digressed on that, but I think working is really important. So work. If you can't go to school, work.
I feel like the thorough line here to check in with the audience is that there are multiple pathways, but you have to put in the work somehow. There are a lot of different paths to fashion. Everyone seems to think that there's like one true line to success. And just the fact that, the book we worked on together with Patricia, is that we had a bunch of entrepreneurs who all have their own pathways to success. And yeah, there is no one true answer. There's not like one beacon where that's going to be the way that you find success. But the main thing is you have to put in the work.
Right. And, and again, like when we had our call today, I listened to some of these people, and I've like read up a little bit on some of these other authors. And, I feel like such a sham, because I'm not an entrepreneur I mean, the title that I gave, I don't know whether they're going to use it or not, is I call myself the reluctant entrepreneur. Never in my life did I want to or think that I could work for myself. I had a lot of my identity tied into the kinds of brands or companies that I was working for. And as Patricia said, I kept getting fired from these jobs. And then it was like, oh, fuck, like a girlfriend, she's actually a very good friend. Her name is Rupal Patel. She's the fashion director of Saks Fifth Avenue. We worked together at Neiman's and Bergdorf's, and she sat me down sort of at lunch one day. This was in 2014. And it was so my last real job was in 2013, working for JCPenney, which was, of all the jobs I've had, the most creative and interesting job of my life, because we were trying to transform. I know we were trying to transform something. I'll go into that in a minute. But so Ron Johnson, the guy who invented Apple Retail, along with Steve Jobs, he was brought in as the CEO to transform JCPenney. So he brought in all of these amazing people. And for a year, we were changing JCPenney, and it was unbelievable. Such an unbelievable experience. It was super creative. It was because all we had to do was make it better. We weren't, being told no, it was all about let's change. So for a creative person, that's a super fantastic brief to have. It's like, that's amazing. Can you do more? That's what the feedback was. It wasn't like, we needed to be, it was like, oh my God, that's great. But when the board fired Ron, a week later, they fired me, because I was promoted. I originally came in to do menswear, but I was promoted a few months in and got my boss's job, which was to oversee all of the private label, men's, women's, kids, and home. And at JCPenney at the time, it was a $15 billion business, and 50% of it, $7.5 billion, was private label. So I was overseeing the design of $7.5 billion worth of, of products.
No pressure or anything, right?
Right. And I had, 250 people reporting to me. And it was like, and I'd never had that had never happened in my career, that kind of job. It was fantastic. It was amazing. It was the most amazing experience. So, which again is a little bit of a thing too, because most people be like, JC Penney. Like I'd worked for, what you said, Bergdorf's, Calvin, Ralph, Barney's. And those were all interesting, some more than others and some nicer than others. But like there was some amazing experience there. But that experience of JC Penney was something truly special because I was working with people that worked at Apple. I was working with people that worked at Abercrombie when Abercrombie was a big deal because one of the executives was from Abercrombie. It was an amazing, and we were hiring amazing people. And it was just such, I worked with Martha Stewart, Ellen DeGeneres. We went to the Oscars, we flew private because it was like they had two planes. It was an amazing experience. And I'm glad I'm not doing it now, in that I'm glad that Rupal set me down and said, you need to work for yourself, because I already had a couple 100,000 followers on Instagram, 100,000 followers on Tumblr. But I was like, I don't want to, I need a job. And, the reality was she was right. I mean, the opportunity and I've made even more money. I made a lot of money doing JCPenney, but I've made even more money doing this. Now, not every year, but like as a total, it's been extremely lucrative, but it didn't happen overnight. And because I was fired from JCPenney and given a sort of nice severance, I was able to give myself the runway to be able to do this, being an entrepreneur. But I don't function like a normal entrepreneur. I don't have, employees. I don't have inventory. There's a lot of things that I don't have. But as a single person, it's amazing the opportunity that's come up because of social media. And because of that, I've been able to work with a lot of really interesting companies. And I'm super grateful for that.
I think that regardless of age or level of experience or whatever, you and I, we're part of like a new generation of entrepreneurs where like entrepreneurs like us have not existed because they didn't have the internet. Right. And so I've built my business off of my reach, my channel, and like all the opportunities that came with that. And so have you. And I did want to ask you about how social media has played a role in your career, because I get so many messages from people who they want the reach of social media, but they don't want to deal with social media. And they always ask me like, is it very important? And I always think like, people have the wrong mindset about social media. And maybe it's because you and I grew up when we didn't have social media, but it's like, you can think of it as a chore, or you can think of it as an opportunity and a gift to like access so many people for free that you would not have been able to access before. I think you're a prime example of how incredible social media can be in terms of like growing a career.
My God, I mean, for sure. I was interviewed by Guy Turbay at the New York Times in 2013. So literally 2014, literally like in the first year of me becoming what I started to say back then was a free agent, which just meant that I could. It's so funny. I get on LinkedIn all these requests for people that like want me to be their agent. I'm like, I'm not an agent. And I love that I call myself a free agent, even though I know nothing about sports. But what I know that means is in sports is that I can do whatever I want. I could play for any team. That's how I bill myself, as I'm a free agent. But what I said about Instagram in 2013, it was only 2 years old at that time. And this is also, my brother and my sister-in-law would be horrified when I say this. I've never really planned for the future, meaning I don't have much savings. But I always said Instagram is going to be my 401k plan. And, and it kind of is. Now I wouldn't recommend that. I wouldn't say as a strategy you should set out and like rely on that because it probably won't work. And I don't even know that it's going to work for me. But what I know is that, yeah, I mean, Instagram is, or social media, social as they call it, is like, sure, I'm sure there's a lot. I don't know anything about it. Like, let me just be perfectly frank. Like these social media managers that are like hashtags and things, and you have to do this, and
That algorithm.
fuck you. Like, I don't like. I got here just fine without doing that. Like, but I do know that there is some science behind it. And I mean, can you imagine if I actually maybe applied a little bit? Maybe I have twice as many followers. I don't really know. Or I can make twice as much money. But the point is that I've done it in my own way, but I'm not stupid. I understand that there are some basic laws of physics or laws of, that you have to sort of follow. But the principal driver of it has been the same thing that's been the driver in my career, which is, I mean, if you have a little restraint, if you have a little bit of taste, if you have a point of view, those things will serve you well. If you're all over the place, if you don't have a little bit of restraint, if you're like an asshole on social media, like, how people are like assholes in real life, it's probably not going to work for you. Or it might. I mean, it worked for Donald Trump, but but I wouldn't say as a rule, that's a good way to like build something. And I did, and again, I can't tell anyone how I got this because I honestly have no idea. But I do believe that it's because I'm authentic. Like, I do believe that it's because I am me and I don't make any apologies for it. And I seem to be having fun with it. And I think people are attracted to those kinds of things like, oh, wow, that looks really fun. Or he or she are funny, or they seem like they're a little bit interesting. If you can harness those ideas, you'll probably do pretty well. And how, we build audiences is the same way you build relationships. Like, that's really what it is. Like, if you're a nice person in real life, if you look someone in the eye when you speak to them, if you remember their name, if you respond when they ask you a question, meaning like engaging, if you can do those basic things in life, you can do them on social media. And you can also ask for help, like, meaning there are people who can help you to do it. They're probably going to be young and they'll probably be at the beginning of their career, but you should listen to them because that's actually something that could be beneficial to you, especially if you're in my age bracket, or even 20 years younger than me. If you're in your 40s, like, you probably could stand to have a 20-year-old help you in that, or a teenager help you in that world. And you might be surprised at the results.
I think my favorite thing about your social media, like I follow you on Instagram, have for a minute, and my favorite thing is nothing you talk about or post about seems incongruent with the rest of you. You don't like shill any sort of random thing where you're like, how much you get paid for that? Because it just all seems consistent with your style and the things that you like. Everything looks like you from what I've seen of you. Of course, nobody can really know you unless they're like your tight friend for 20 years. But like, just from what I've seen of you aesthetically, like it all looks like it belongs. And so I feel that authenticity. Like, I like this. Hey, look at this. I like it. And it feels real because it looks like your style. And so when you were talking about being authentic online, I think other people really see that too.
Well, thank you. And I mean, listen, I have turned down many opportunities because they didn't feel right for me. I do tell people that I am that I'm not in the business of saying no, and meaning because of like the pandemic, like a lot of things have changed, and yet I have to say that the people that are continuing to work with me are exactly the kind of people that I want to work with. I mean, are there some things that are a stretch? I'm sure there are, but at the same, and I remember seeing some comments early on when I I really did make a pivot from doing more consulting work to, but there was always, let's say, Instagram in the background. It's shifted, and especially starting in 2020, where now starting to do some more consulting, but for 2020, 21, it was 100% Instagram. And but the people that come to me are the people that I have to say I want to work with. And I'm not in the business of saying no, but I have said no. I've had to have said no, because I just feel it's like when people offer me, they show me their brand or something and they say, have a look. Is there anything here you'd like? I tell people no a lot, because I don't want you to send me something that I'm not going to use or that I'm not going to appreciate. And I'd rather just tell you no, thank you, and then just have it sit there. And because it breaks my heart, like when people sort of say, oh, I look at your, I know your work and I think you would love this, and then I see what they're offering and I'm like, really? Because I think if you looked at it, you would understand that that's not something that I probably would wear. But I appreciate I'm always touched when they at least reach out, but I'm always like, wow, I guess I'm not doing a very good job of telling,
Now,
telling.
those people, okay, I get those emails too, and they see the numbers on the profile. They see how many subscribers I have, and they're like, oh, she's the one. And it's like, do you want to represent our yoga pants? I'm like, when have I ever repped a brand? Period. Like, I'm a teacher. Like, what are you talking about? I get so many offers from video games. They're like, your channel is perfect to promote our next video game. I'm like, is it a fashion game? No, it's like not even close. So yeah, there are just some people who are always going to just look at the number, like see how many followers you are, and just get so excited about that. But that takes me to some other questions, because given you have so much at your disposal and that you get to see so much product, whether it's just stuff you shop for, stuff that gets sent to you, what do you think is missing in menswear, if anything? Or what's something you'd like to see more of?
Oh my God, this is going to be another one of those kind of things that I'm going to say this and probably offend somebody, but it always, so in my career, I've met some different people. I'm thinking specifically of, like, there was this, kind of a finance person who started a collection. I'm not going to say what the category was, but it was like, I started this because I just couldn't find what I was looking for in the market. And I always think to myself and want to say to their face, then you're not looking hard enough, because it exists. Trust me. So with that said, what do I think is missing? I mean, in a way, nothing is missing. But I do believe that there's lots of opportunity. And I believe that about the collaborations that I do. Okay, I'm not reinventing the wheel. I am not Rei Kawakubo. I am not Yoji Yamamoto. I am not a real designer who is, giving us new ideas, new proportions, making us think in a way. That's not my role. Like, I've never been that. I wish I was that person. I'm not that person. What I am is an interpreter. I mean, I believe that I have a point of view and a sort of like a knowledge and a skill base that I always think about things like, oh, I really like that, but I want it this way. Like, I want to add or subtract or change the color of something that already exists. So in a way, me doing collaborations with people is like the perfect, what they get out of it is like an exposure to a new audience or a bigger audience, or like in the case of, if it's a brand in Europe or in Asia, a new market, meaning the United States. And I get to piggyback on their expertise. Like, they make luggage. So I don't have to worry about, if we decide to make something, is it going to be nice? I already know it's going to be nice because of what they make. Or in the case of Lardini, they make the most beautiful tailored clothing. So I know that if we make a jacket, it's not going to be like a cheap, gross jacket that looks like somebody made, in their back room. No, it's going to be a beautiful jacket. Grenson shoes, or, I mean, there's so many great people that I've worked with that already do something really well. So I don't have to worry about what the end product is going to be, you know. So that's and what I love is that I can sort of give them my spin on their brand or their product. And I think that's a really fun utilization of my skills as a merchant and then as a and having worked in design. Um, so I don't know if I answered that, but you know, I what's missing? I mean, I always think that there is an opportunity for, you know, like in sneakers, you know, there are a million sneakers out there, but there's always a different colorway, meaning like somebody's interpretation or somebody can bring to the table like their color sense and, you know, and always manage to make something look new and different. So I do think that there are ways for lots of people to contribute, but, you know, I can't say that there's any great white space in the world because frankly, there's too much product as there is, as it is.
So coming off of that, I would say personally that the thing that's missing in fashion in general are products that cater to different body shapes and sizes. So like on every level, like people who are very tall, people who are very large, people who are very short, you know, like the
All
whole
right.
thing, like that's what needs to be filled. And personally, and just also just hearing feedback from so many people I talk to, they don't want anything new and different. They want what everyone else gets to wear, but in their size. I hear this a lot, especially from the plus size women's market. Is like, we want to wear the same trendy stuff all the other girls get to wear, except in my size. I hear that a lot.
Okay. Okay. So, and I think in that realm, which has never really been my realm, meaning it's not my experience. So it's not because again, I've always said this too, like this is a selfish endeavor. You know what I mean? Meaning like my working in fashion, it all happened for purely selfish reasons because I wanted clothes for me. That's why I work in menswear. I don't, I'm not a woman. I don't, you know, so it's like, why would it's purely selfish. So to your point about sizes. Okay. And again, I don't want to say this to offend anyone, except that because it's my reality being short and let's say thick, you know, like I'm not thin, I'm thick. I mean, I'm muscular, but I'm also thick. Not everybody can wear everything. That's the first thing. So that's, you know, so with that said, what you do, what the strategy is how to figure out how to have the look, whatever that is, in your way, size, shape, type, price. Because again, not everybody can afford the same thing. But one of the great things that's happened in the past 20 years because of fast fashion, because of just the, I don't know, because of the, you know, supply chain, I guess, it's easier than it ever was to be able to look a certain way at sort of any given price. You can look at that up here. You can look at, you know, you can look this way down there. And that's a great thing. I know that the size thing is a problem, is a conundrum, because in the same way that, you know, not all plus sizes are the same. Some large people are short and some large people are tall. And that creates a huge problem for being able to, you know, to make clothes. Now, I mean, again, people who do production or pattern cutting understand this very well. So let me go back to the body thing. So like everybody wants to look taller and thinner. Michael Kors says that. And I believe that's true about men and it's true about women, even if they don't articulate it that way. So my style has always been finding clothes that make me feel good in them, you know, first. Once you've figured out who those brands or those types of fabrics, because some fabrics hold you in and some fabrics let it all out. So you have to understand that if you're sort of like going this direction with your body, you're probably not a candidate for chiffon. But that doesn't mean that you can't find other ways to, accessorize or to, but like you gotta sort of be comfortable in what you're wearing with the right foundation garments, the right sort of like cut, the right style. And then you'll look because you'll feel good in them. You will radiate and sort of like project something. I know I'm not addressing all of this thing about sizes, but the point is that once you can sort of crack the code of the first part, then you can start to attack what it is that you want to do. Is it like shoes? Because the good news about shoes is that for the most part, I know that there are people who have, particularly large feet or particularly small feet, and so they can't have necessarily every designer brand going. Outside of those problems, which I don't know how to correct, for the most part, a great pair of shoes can work with any body type or most body types, not any body type, most body types. The same with bags, accessories, and you can sort of find a way to feel like you're getting the look or the sort of the spirit of something without, unless or until you can figure out what other clothing that might be. Now, as a brand, so for brands, the conundrum of sizes is, and also because of the terrible business model of fashion, meaning the idea that every 6 months it goes away. Like this, it's a terrible business model. This idea that we tell people that from the it's basically clothes are the used car market, because the second it hits the threshold of a store, it starts to decrease in value. Because if it comes into a store in September, in 2 months it's going to be marked down. Also, when you need it. So everything about the business model is stupid in retail and fashion. I mean, I've said this a million times. I hope people will quote me on this. I hope people will call me out, because I'm talking to you department stores. I'm talking to you brands that ship, summer clothes in January and ship fall clothes in July. Stupidest thing in the world. I said that when I was a buyer. I'm like, why would you do that? It's so stupid. Like, you need winter clothes when it's cold, not when it's hot. But the problem for brands is sizes. So if you have to make a billion sizes across all these different matrices, and it's only going to be good for 2 months, because and women's contemporary is the worst market of all. That's the market that really accelerated these markdowns. This idea that well, it's been on the floor for 2 months. We need newness. Let's get rid of it. It's like, and then they take it all back, that they then shovel into, the off-price channel. And meanwhile, they're just bringing in more shit, because if you keep doing, when people talk about Yves Saint Laurent was the greatest designer ever. Yeah, he did it twice a year. Today, these brands, and again, it started with women's contemporary. We need 2 deliveries a month, A and B, June A, June B. No, you don't. No, you don't. We need newness. No, you don't. You don't need newness. You don't need 2 deliveries a month. You don't need 12 deliveries a year. This is the problem. So if you're a brand and the thing you want to do is make the fewest amount of things possible, because that's why the shoe business is so hard, because there are so many sizes. If you start to take a top and make it wide, short, tall, long, skinny, cropped, by the time that one top in that one fabric, that one print, it's like you would spend, I mean, you're basically making couture, you're making sort of something made to measure. That's not to say, I'm not trying to say to people who are looking for these things that you're out of luck, but what I'm saying is that there are opportunities for people to to do the same thing that high street brands do, which is look at the runway and do your version of it for that specific market. But one brand cannot do that for everyone. Or if they do, it's a very rare thing. And, it just, I mean, I can't, I mean, some of the designer brands now by adding kids, and I know that there's a lot of, you see sort of different sizes on the runway now in sort of some of these bigger brands, Michael Kors or, or whoever. I mean, it's great, but what I wonder is how does that really come to the market? Like, I don't know where all those clothes live, you know, be,
I mean, when I talk to students and clients and stuff, this is why I'm always saying start small and start with like a niche shape, size, market price somewhere. Because, students come to me, they're so ambitious, they're so excited, and they love fashion, and I don't want to kill that. But, they're like, I want to dress everybody. And I'm like, no, 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 no. You got to like narrow it down to a customer and really address those needs. And as you make more money, you can help, hire help to expand. But yeah, like if you want to dress everybody, it's just going to fall apart. And so you just start with a few great products for your niche customer and what they need from fashion and grow from there.
well, right, because it goes back to what I said about like having to refine my taste and my style. It's an editing process. It's like you can't be all things to all people. So you have to learn to sort of like pick a lane, stay in it, and from there you can grow. I mean, it's like, many men's designers have added women's, Tom Brown, being a perfect example, or Ralph Lauren being a men's designer who added women's later. Like, there is room for lots of people to do lots of things, but everybody doesn't get or need to do everything, especially straight off the bat.
For sure. I mean, who even has the money for that? If you have the money for that, what are you doing in fashion?
Well, right. Don't invest it in fashion. It's the worst investment you could make.
So the other point I wanted to make when you were talking about how you think there's already so much product in fashion, what is your take on sustainability in fashion?
Well, it's one of those things that I think has taken hold. 20 years ago, 18 years ago, it was all about organic. And I remember like this, like thinking that is the most bullshit concept because the dyeing process is already so, harsh to the environment. Like what the hell is organic cotton going to do, once you've dyed it? So that one, let's say, kind of went away. But sustainability, because I do think that everybody, everybody who goes outside or looks out their window, understands that the planet is not functioning correctly. Like it is not behaving the way that it did even 20 years ago, or frankly, even 10 years ago. So this idea is, and I mean, I have to be honest, I am not an expert. It's probably, I could say the wrong thing, but I will say this, it's here to stay. And I think that, whether it's sustainability per se, or just the idea that people are becoming more conscious of their consumption, of their choice in material. I mean, for me, it's, the worst is the human labor that produces cheap clothes. This is the biggest crime ever committed. I mean, if you see a $5 t-shirt or a $5 pair of jeans, those are not ethically treated people making them. Like it's impossible. So I don't want to single anyone out. I mean, it's, unfortunately, it's consumers who have also put us in this place because, that's one of the things that we learned about with JCPenney was this idea that if we say the price is the right price, meaning that if something costs, like a towel, they did all the research and they found out that a towel costs, they sold the most towels at $10. What they figured out was they don't need to retail it for 20 and tell them they're getting it for half price. Just put it at $10. But what happened is it didn't work. People want to be told that they're saving all this money. Well, the same thing is true with sustainability. The same thing is true. People will check boxes on questionnaires on, when they're being surveys that, of course I believe in that. Absolutely. It's, I believe in that. But when they vote with their dollars, that they're doing the opposite, they don't. Do you know what I mean? And so there's a lot of, that's where the sustainability thing, I think, works to a point when, when you give people the option of saying, you can have this for 25 made in America, or you can have it for 14 made in Asia. Very rarely do they pick the 25 made in America, even if they believe, even if they said on a survey, oh, I would always buy made in America first. Yes, as a concept, you probably would, but when it comes down to it, and part of it is because it's an economic reality. It's like I don't have the money to spend 25. I only have the money to spend 14. Like, it's an economic reality for me. So I'm not saying that like these customers are doing the wrong thing. It's just that we've gotten to a place where it's, we've gotten addicted to cheap things in all areas of life, and so weaning us off that's the biggest issue with sustainability. Because like, listen, if your economic circumstances are such, no, you should not go out and spend hundreds of dollars on something. The good news is you can probably find nice things that fit your circumstances. But if you're a person of, let's say, normal means, but you're just consuming like crazy, so you can have hundreds of things instead of like one really nice thing or 5 really nice things, that's where we need to sort of like adjust. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. That absolutely makes sense. Yeah.
But for me, the biggest problem is the human capital that it takes to make cheap clothes. And that's really a horrific problem, in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. When sustainable brands, they offer things and they're not made in ethical factories, or if they're so cheap, you wonder who made them. It's like, can you really call yourself sustainable? You think that sustainable only means like, recycle polyester or something? It's like, keeping people in these positions is not sustainable. It's not right. So no, you cannot call yourself sustainable if those are your manufacturing practices.
No, and again, it's marketing and it's bullshit, a lot of it. But I do believe that as a concept, it has legs. And I think we're only going to see more and more of that. And I think you kind of, I mean, if anybody's going to ask me about trends, first of all, I hate that word. Like I've always hated that word, because I think it implies the idea of trendy, or the idea that like it's not going to be a good idea next season if it's a good idea this one. Now, like I said, there's always, I've made lots of mistakes, but like, I do think that a trend that I'm seeing is toward better and more classic in general. I'm talking about in menswear specifically, but I even maybe see it in women's too. This idea that I do think it's an offshoot of this a sustainability concept, which is, instead of buying 5 really dodgy things, just buy 1 or 2 really nice ones. And I think more people are waking up to that concept. And I feel like I'm seeing that around, and women have done it for years with like buying a better handbag or a better pair of shoes, and then buying, fast fashion clothes or basic clothes. But then, but I think then with like, then they want to have a nice coat, then they want to have nice trousers, then they want to have a nice blouse. And, before you know it, it's like they're sort of trading up, but they're doing it by not having more. They're doing it by having less.
I mean, personally, I think a lot of it stems from celebrity worship culture and this idea that you can't wear anything twice, because celebrities don't wear anything twice. They're always on the red carpet wearing something new. And so people want to emulate that in some way. They know they're not a celebrity, but they want to emulate that in some way. And so they think that they have to wear something new to every party that they go to. And that's really not true. And honestly, unless you are a celebrity, people are not paying that close attention to what you're wearing party to party. I think people can just calm down about that and rewear things.
First of all, those celebrities that they're seeing on red carpet events, 9.9 times out of 10 They're borrowed. They don't own them. Every once in a while, someone like Jane Fonda or someone will, appear somewhere and she will talk about the fact that, like, I didn't borrow this. This is mine. I paid for it. And it's blank years old, and she even made a comment, which again is major. I should make this, I should make this declaration, but I can't. And that is, she said, I'm 80, however old she is, 80. It was when she was getting arrested in DC for those, all those things that a couple winters ago or last winter. And she said, I'm 80, whatever, 82 or 83. I'm not buying any more clothes. I have tons of beautiful clothes. Like, my commitment to the planet is I'm not buying anymore. And I'm not saying that we should do that. I should do that. I'm not saying that everybody should do that. But I do think that people have to remember that, like, they don't own those clothes. They are borrowed. The jewels are borrowed. The clothes are borrowed. I do that to myself sometimes too. Not to the point that I think I have to have new clothes, but I do think about, like, oh, I was wearing that at Paris Fashion Week, so I've been photographed in it. But trust me, most of the clothes that I wear are mine. I don't borrow clothes ever, because it's not, I'm not a model size. So things have to be tailored to fit me. And I'm not going to wear something now I've worn a couple of things here and there, but it's very hard for me to do. Also, I feel it's my job to be a customer, to be a good customer. And I am a good customer. I pay for most everything that you see me in. Every once in a while I get gifts, but but what I think is, and I do bring things back out, and I like that. Kate Middleton does that in the royal family. Like, the royal family is famous for, like, wearing things over and over again. And I think that if people are so, they should watch the royals, because it's a good thing, and I do think that people are starting to become more aware of things like that.
Yeah, I would love to see that, because if you're going to follow celebrities, just acknowledge that they just live a different life than us, and their wardrobe needs are different. Like, it's hard to tell celebrities certain things because they are making their money off of how they're perceived by the public. And so they have a lot of pressure to look good all the time. And I get that. I'm not unrealistic about that. But that's not everyday people's realities. And so you don't have to consume and create, like, buy so much stuff so that you can emulate this lifestyle that is not yours, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. But yeah.
Right. I mean, listen, it's a little bit, I'm not saying I'm a celebrity, but it's a little bit my reality too.
That is the reality. You are a celebrity.
I recognize that I, have to look a certain way, and the clothes that I need are different than the clothes that a lot of people are going to need because of the kind of events that I attend. But yeah, I always say people should not do what I do. Like, people shouldn't dress like me, not because they shouldn't dress like me, but they shouldn't dress like me because, not because I don't want them to wear what I'm wearing, but it's like, nobody should put the value of time and effort into getting dressed as I do. I recognize that it's a choice, but I am the biggest, I'm envious of people that have a uniform. I think that is the chicest thing in the world. Like, it's so awesome. And it's what was great. I hated his uniform, but what was so great about Steve Jobs is, like, this idea that, like, I'm busy doing something else. I don't need to waste my time thinking about what I'm going to wear. And I respect that 1000%.
I have a little cubicle in my closet where this is my teaching wardrobe and that's it. And then just, like, I'm in my 40s. I've worked in fashion for a long time. I've been invited to my share of stuff where I have to, like, look good. And so, like, that's the rest of my wardrobe is, like, stuff I can pull out on the fly whenever I get invited to stuff. Once this stupid pandemic is over, that whole thing. But yeah,
yeah, and everybody wants to look good, like, you do need to, everybody should have something in their wardrobe that is special, that, that makes them feel special, that they don't wear all the time, that is, and it's an important thing. It's really important.
Yeah.
To our well-being.
Speaking of well-being, I had a question that I thought was so good. Can you speak to the importance of physical health, mental health, and spiritual health as you age and how it influences your style and style choices?
So this is what my book is going to be about. Not this is not my chapter, by the way. My chapter is more about our story, my story. But I am going to work on a book, and
Trisha
it's
got you. She got.
well, yes.
No, it's great. I can't wait to read it. No,
A,
seriously.
a really funny thing that somebody said, this straight guy said, which was hilarious because the cover of the title says, so on the link that I sent out when I was asking people to do the pre-order, you know, Patricia Wooster, Lindsay Ardmore, and somebody said, "Is Patricia your drag name?" Which she also thought was hilarious. I sent her a screenshot of the tech of the conversation.
Oh, that's too good. Oh, that's so funny. Oh my
Okay.
God.
So,
Oh my God.
so
Oh.
anyway, the next book, the real book,
Mhm.
and or maybe like I may do something else that in a sort of educational thing, but right now at 62, everything you just asked in that question is 100% of what I think about right now. And I realize that a lot of the choices that I've made prior have not served me well about how I eat, what I eat, the way that I treat my body, or frankly, my mental health. So let's start with mental health. So I got sober 26 and a half years ago in 1995 when I was 35 years old. I was high my entire 4 years of college and the first 12 years of living in New York. And, I should be dead. But it was when it was understood that that wasn't going to be my path of, like I was going to be, I'm still around. That's when I've started to, in the last 5 years for sure, when I stopped smoking. So I started smoking when I gave up drugs the first time, but I finally stopped in 2015. I started to really realize like, wow, I'm here for the long haul. So I really better take care of myself. So I've been seeing an age management doctor really since 2008 when I was living in he lives in Los Angeles. He was my doctor in LA, and I continue to see him. And I, take supplements, testosterone, peptides, human growth hormone, and I get my blood checked every 3 months. And like I said, I haven't done it perfectly. I've yo-yoed in the past. So what's that? 12, 13 years of doing this. I've yo-yoed up and down, but in the last, well, so during the pandemic, I went haywire with eating, and I've started to lose that weight again since October of last year. And it's in this last moment that I've really realized like, oh shit, my body does not respond the same way that it did in my 30s, 40s, and even my 50s. It's different. And I think that what we eat, what we put in our body is a direct result of what comes out, meaning what disease, and I'm not saying that, eating potato chips causes cancer, but I do think that, you have to look at everything. If things are coming up for you, you have a part in it, especially around what you put in your body. And so while I'm not a practicing vegetarian or vegan or have ever wanted to be, but I'm way more conscious of the amount of meat, which is way less than it's ever been, and the amount of vegetables, which is way greater than it's ever been, and how important exercise. So exercise has always been part of my life since I was listen, I'm a gay guy. I want to get laid. So it's like going to the gym is an important part of like that. But again, I've gone to the gym. I've not gone to the gym. And the last 6 years, I've been very, very, very diligent. And the unfortunate thing is that if it was just the gym and you could look good, I'd be great, but it's not. The diet is equally important. And so I think that there are a lot of questions that people have. And I think there's a lot of things I can share about diet, exercise, and just general well-being, friendships, relationships. And I don't mean that you should be in one, but the kinds of relationships you have with people are a good indicator of how you're doing. If you're like always fighting with people, probably mentally you're not in a good place. Whether even things like Wordle, like I think that we should be stimulating our minds too, not because I think I'm going to get Alzheimer's, but because it keeps us interesting. I mean, I'm learning to speak French and Italian again, because it's important to exercise your brain. And I think and I think physical exercise is and by that, I don't mean that you have to do CrossFit every day, but moving is really important.
So let's do a rapid fire round to wrap things up. Quick answers. What do you think of TikTok fashion?
I have no idea.
Are you on TikTok?
So I have a TikTok account. I couldn't get Nick Wooster. I'm the Nick Wooster. I've never made a TikTok. So this is the thing. I probably sound like an old person now. I have purposely avoided TikTok because I think it's too much work. Because I see these people that do all those outfit changes and all these things. And it's like, I know what a nightmare it is to do that. I don't want to do that. It's too much work.
It's a lot of work.
But I do watch a lot of TikTok.
Yeah. Okay.
And what do I think about TikTok fashion? The same thing I think about all fashion. It's an expression. It's something cute and interesting and fun. And not everybody has to do everything.
What are some new menswear brands we should know that you're excited to watch?
This is like the worst question you can ask me, because for someone who's, I couldn't tell.
What comes to mind? It should be like, oh, this is no?
No. So
nobody that's like.
I guess it depends on what you mean by new. There are some brands that I know for 90% of the population they've never heard of. So in which case they would be new, but they're not the newest. There's a really amazing brand from LA called ERL. And it's this guy, I don't even know his name, but it's his initials. And it's in Dover Street Market because it's part of the Comme des Garçons family, but he produces it in California. And it's in, sort of expensive stores, but he makes these puffer jackets and in really cute colors. And he also makes them for kids. And they're the cutest things in the world. They're really, really, really cute. So ERL is someone to look out for.
All right, I'm gonna check that out. What was your dream job when you were in your teens? I know you always wanted to be around clothes, but did you have a specific thing?
So when I was a kid, I wanted to be a buyer because I didn't understand. I knew that there were buyers for stores and I knew that buyers traveled and I wanted to travel. So and then when I became a buyer, I would sit in the runway shows and go, I want to be a designer. And that's really been the two things that I thought of and did.
Very cool. And last fun little question from one of my followers, and I quote, how do you keep the mustache so luxurious?
I brush it.
You don't use any special products or anything?
I don't. It's very wiry today. I really want to cut it off, but I just brush it.
You just brush it. I mean, obviously, I don't know anything about facial hair upkeep, so.
Lucky you. It's yeah, I mean, the beard, the problem with the beard is that if it goes too long, I feel like Dirty Santa. So I try to keep it short.
Nah, I wouldn't have pegged you as Dirty Santa, but yeah. I think when people have seen you without the beard, but I think if people saw you without the mustache, that would be like a double take.
I mean, I always have some sort of stubble going. after I got my facelift, I did sort of go clean shaven for a little while, but it's like, it's just easier to just have a little stubble.
I love how you just drop these things that most people would be extremely reluctant to share. And you just drop them like, whatever. It's like when I got my facelift, it's like, okay. And then you're talking about your AA meeting and just like, I just love how you're like, yeah, so whatever. Taboo subjects, what are those? Whatever.
Well, I'm sure that, my parents would be, or my dad or my mom, if she were still alive, would be like, a little discretion would be a good thing. I don't, I've always been a little bit unfiltered. I mean, it's documented. It's in a magazine that I got a facelift. I mean, I talked about it for Esquire a few years ago, but like, yeah, I mean, because you know what? It's one of those things that like, I was so, okay, when I tell you I don't want to get my picture taken, I'm telling you the truth. Like, I really don't like getting my picture taken. I've seen a lot of nice pictures of me, and I'm always flattered when I think they're really good. But so when all this started in 2010, by 20, so I was 50, by 2014, genetically, my mom and people in my family have that kind of turkey thing that like hangs down here. Mm-hmm. So I started to really notice it. And it was one of those things that like bugged the shit out of me, that I would see these pictures and I would be like, I don't like that. And so, people, in my 20s and 30s, I think I talked about wanting to get a facelift just because like everybody's so insecure about their looks, including myself. But I knew that this was one of those things that could be fixed. And so I saw this. So I saw 4 doctors, and like the first doctor was like, we're going to do filler and all these things. And I was like, ugh. And then like this woman who I probably would have gone to, who, like trained under someone in Brazil. And then there was like another like plastic surgery nightmare kind of place that the people who worked there looked really freaky and scary. And then I saw the doctor who did it for me. And the whole thing was, he was traveling and I was traveling at the time that I knew I had a window to be able to do it, which was the summer of 2016 in August, because I pretty much have the month of August off because of working with Europe so much. So I knew I could take the time off. And so they said, listen, we don't really do this, but send us a photo of your face. And if we think that it's worth you coming in, we'll juggle everything and you can pop up here and see the doctor. So I took the picture and sent it off, and like immediately the phone rang. He can see you at 3:00. So like I knew that it was a good fit, because I wasn't going in trying to say, make me look 25 years younger. It's like I had a problem and he was able to fix it. So that's, for me, I'm happy to talk about it. It's like anything else. Like I had a problem and I got it fixed. I don't think there's any shame in that.
Yeah, no, I just super love how open you are about everything. It's like, yeah, this is my life. And yeah. Okay, I could talk to you for another 3 hours, but we do have to cut this at some point. So okay. I'm going to round things out. Is there anything, so like, I usually end these things with some sort of call to action. Is there anything you would like to say, like follow Nick on Instagram, or anything that you want me to add?
Follow me on Instagram, because as of today, I'm at 915,000 followers. So I should, if I keep going at the rate I've been going, I should hit 1 million sometime this year, probably September, October. So
that's exciting. Everybody follow Nick on Instagram. I'm going to drop the link in the description box below. Follow Nick on Instagram so we can help him get to 1 million even faster than he thinks he will. Okay, I'm going to drop everything in the description box below. The link to the book we both worked on, his website, his Instagram, all those good things. I hope you really enjoyed this conversation. I learned a lot. I love having experts in their field come in, because I also, end up learning new things, and I love that. Drop your questions and your comments and your love for Nick in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video.